Hey there, it's Evan Nathaniel Grimm, and welcome to my July 2024 forecast. We're going to talk about the energetic currents of the month ahead and also dive into what each zodiac sign can expect. So, as per usual, I'm going to share my screen and we will sort of look at the probably the most explosive moment of July right away, which is Mars conjunct Uranus. And this is just to illustrate the sort of tumultuous nature of the month of July. So we really have some major shifts going on. There are some reflective energies with Saturn retrograde, Neptune retrograde, but I think we're kind of jolted into a new age or even a new era with the Mars-Uranus conjunction. It feels revolutionary. It feels shocking. It feels unexpected. And I'm going to go through that transit and all the other major ones throughout the show today. And yeah, with July, there's this feeling here of almost like nothing will be the same after this. And it does feel like there's sort of, again, these catalytic moments like the Mars-Uranus conjunction. And I think it's up to each of us as individuals to manage the chaos that ensues during that time. And, finding a little bit of meaning in that mess. And I think that in July, we're ready to move past the Pluto and Capricorn era, thanks to a full moon conjunct Pluto, July 21st. And hopefully, we are fully grasping the karmic lessons that we've been learning for the past 16 years or so, and deciding not to replay the same cycles and accepting the end of an era and all the stable structures that come with it, which in a way is a tragedy, but it's also a gift because it's allowing for new structures to replace it. So, for example, like on the walk, I took an evening walk before the show, and I was like looking around this neighborhood I just moved to, and I was like, I saw this house that just looked like it'd been there for, decades, probably 100 years. And it's like, there's been no repairs clearly done to it. It's just like absolutely decrepit. I don't even know if anyone was living in there, but, you just saw like sort of the structure was like completely crumbling. And it's like, at what point is this house, going to be condemned? And it's like there's something to the house. There's some bones to the house. It's like it feels almost like indestructible just sitting there. But at the same time, with just similar to Pluto and Capricorn, there's this feeling that, well, despite that sort of clear rigidity to it, it's like at some point it's like showing its sort of weaknesses, and perhaps there is something else that could fill its sort of place. So that's the sort of the feeling right now is, whatever you've been building up, whether it's the last 10 years, last 15 years, 16 years, whatever you have and you've held on to very firmly, or you feel like, there's a solid presence in your life through the lens of like a job or maybe an organization or even just a belief system that you've had. It's like Pluto is going back to the 29th degree later this year, and this full moon is highlighting that energy of like, okay, this is the last stop, this is the last mile. Do you really want to keep holding on to this thing and feeling stuck there? So it's like going back to that house. It's like, well, okay, the house, it's a place of shelter. I know it's there. I know exactly what I'm getting out of it. But at some point, you have to wake up and realize, well, this is irreparable. Like I have to just go somewhere else in order to grow. So there is this finality to July. And simultaneous with that, again, we have this very sort of disorderly conjunction of Mars and Uranus in the middle of July. And with Uranus being the dispositor of Pluto and Aquarius, power maybe with Pluto being power may be returning to the people. We are entering an era where people are finding their inner authority, and this is potentially the catalyst to the next era. And I think it's going to speed everything up. And again, in a very reactive way. And I do think it feels kind of shocking. It almost feels revolutionary. Like we don't know if maybe it's protests. Is it a cyber attack? Is it financial upheaval? Even though the markets generally don't really crash this time of year, it's more of a fall season type of thing or spring thing. But it's certainly a transition point. So now I'm going to talk about the dominant transits in July. So we have, again, Mars conjunct Uranus. That feels like a collective convulsion and a jolting of sudden, like a sudden change. It's like this other shoe is dropping. And maybe in the US, that has something to do with like the political candidates Mars conjunct Uranus is occurring during the Republican National Convention. It is happening on Donald Trump's midheaven, 4 days after his sentencing. And so, given the fact that his conviction was handed down while Mercury was conjunct Uranus on his midheaven, when you add in the malefic planet like Mars, and you put that on his midheaven, conjunct Algol, by the way, which is a fixed star associated with Medusa, we have something potentially very disruptive, very destructive. And I feel like, either that sentencing is more heavy-handed than expected, or just by the pomp and circumstance of that sentencing, there's just a lot of chaos, with just the fact, the energetic momentum of like that sentencing and then the convention. There is a sense of like dissatisfaction bubbling up. And then at the same time, we have on the other side, Biden. There's a lot of growing concerns about his fitness to run for office. Depending on where you get your news and what you've been reading about, there are some stories about, well, maybe there's some posturing going on to find an alternative. None of that is actually corroborated or confirmed, but maybe after a few days after I'm filming this with the debate, even something will be revealed there about, again, like literally his state of mind right now, and that Mars-Uranus conjunction could also speak to some changes there on the other side. So the other major transits, we have the Capricorn full moon, like I said, conjunct Pluto, the end of an era, and illuminating, all of hopefully the karmic lessons you've learned and you're ready to move on from. And with Pluto there, it's like really a transformation of self and of the way that you participate in society and the way that you cohere or adhere to systems, or the way that you break away from those systems. And then we also have Saturn and Neptune retrograde in July. So very reflective, of your belief systems, your spiritual aspirations. Definitely, this is a health-related retrograde. So a lot of people are thinking about, are there contaminants in my water or my food? Are there toxins? Do I really want to keep drinking alcohol, or do I want to sober up? And this, I mean, I just feel like there's going to be a lot of news stories coming up in July about, the state of our healthcare system, or, maybe there are some health concerns, or there are some pathogens sort of spreading, or, but I really think that this is a time where you're reflecting on how can I find my own sort of inner authority and autonomy to make the right health choices myself, and because we're seeing with the end stage of Saturn and Neptune, that's 36-year cycle, we're in the balsamic phase of it. So we're seeing, in the spirit of what I just said about decrepit structures, we're seeing how unsustainable the current healthcare system is, and I'm really talking about the U.S. there, but and unsustainable for a number of reasons, of course. But if you're watching this, then you're a spiritual person. You understand that everything is energetically connected, and I'm hoping that during Saturn and Neptune retrograde, we start to think about, well, maybe there is a new system we can design where we are, administering health recommendations that factor in, emotions, energy, and then maybe even with Saturn being structure, maybe people such as astrologers and spiritual healers, Reiki masters, psychics, remote viewers, like maybe they will have a bit more credibility in the healing space. So, but I think on a personal level too, a lot of people are grappling with overwhelm and a lot of emotions, and feelings of sometimes separateness, isolation, even depression. I mean, it's definitely a bit of a heavy sort of retrograde, and with Saturn and Neptune both retrograde in Pisces. But amidst that, I guess, that heavy feeling, I still think that there is, with Pisces, a healing force of like, well, I'm not the only one going through this. So just know that there is some, like, we're all kind of grieving. We're all kind of grieving in a way. I think we are actually, there is this low flying sort of grief about, yeah, this is the end of a system that we've grown up around, especially if you're like born around the time of like I was in 1990. You know, I was born during the previous Saturn Neptune conjunction in Capricorn, and that my whole life I've been, you know, raised to believe that there's this sort of utopic, globalized world that where we can all achieve harmony and peace because we're all economically dependent on one another, and we have, you know, exports, imports of goods. But it's like, you know, that is clearly it's not gonna fly anymore. We have an uptick in tension. We do have a continuation of all kinds of tragic wars. And I do see that crescendoing over the next 2 years. I've talked about this on my podcast, which, by the way, you should check out, Astrology Unbound. But I talked about how there in 2026 there could be a draft. Sure enough, a few weeks after I said that, there was an automatic registration of I think males from 18 to 26 to automatically register them for military service, or for the draft, I should say. So it does feel like the gears of war are spinning and continuing to spin faster. And so that entire notion of like from 1989, 1990, that, oh, with the end of the Cold War, everything's, you know, going to be much smoother going forward because we all have this shared objective of like, I don't know, living well and, you know, being economically prosperous. But again, we've seen the splinters, we've seen the cracks in that system. So it is a time of loss, and for just on an existential scale, on a collective scale. But I still think that with Saturn and Neptune, it is a time to reflect on, okay, well, if I stop putting faith in this other, again, extremely centralized bureaucratic system, how can I put faith in myself? And how can I really find, you know, again, that unbreakable spirit and purpose within myself, and actually share that with others, or have others share that with me, so we can all raise the frequencies, as it were. Now, we also have an opposition to Pluto this month from the Sun, Venus, and Mercury, which will intensify some of your conversations and your relationships. We will have Mercury in a pre-shadow phase before a retrograde in August. So I'll point that out and time that out so that you'll know when to be more judicious with how you know, send those emails, those text messages. We are going to start to feel Jupiter also square Saturn. It's not going to be exact in July, but when Jupiter is receiving a superior square from Saturn, we're going to see, you know, ideas, philosophies, belief systems, religion being tested. But I want to go to that sort of time period in this chart here. So we're really seeing it, you know, Jupiter here by the last, you know, week or so of July. It's within 5 degrees there of separation. That definitely counts. That's within the orb of influence of a square. And in the classical tradition, you know, Saturn is in a superior position here because it's in the 10th house relative to Gemini and relative to Jupiter, I should say. And therefore, Saturn is exerting its power, limiting Jupiter's sort of expansive nature, forcing it to contract a little bit. But I'm going to push back on that a little because, you know, even though it's a superior square, Saturn is in a fairly weak position here. It is in a weak position because it is in the balsamic phase of the Saturn-Neptune cycle. It is very anemic in the sign of Pisces. And Jupiter, to me, is kind of feeding Saturn and Neptune some ideas. It's like really, and this is just sort of a vision I had right before I started this show. I was like, I just kept like I was doing my research on like Jupiter, Saturn, superior square, like let's like really think about this, but I wasn't really feeling like the traditional techniques were really going to do it justice. Like this is where I think there needs to be a little bit of intuition injected into this. And what I'm seeing here is Jupiter kind of throwing some breadcrumbs to Saturn and Neptune, because Jupiter's in Gemini, very, very expansive with the mind and learning so many new things. And that's what you're doing right now. You know, you're having hopefully provocative conversations with people. You're reconsidering your conceptions of pretty much everything and what you believe. And so whether that's through the lens of like maybe new forms of media, new sources of media where you're getting information, you're learning just more extensively about something, what's really happening. And so with Jupiter squaring Saturn and Neptune to some extent, I mean, it's really squaring the end stage of Jupiter of the Saturn Neptune cycle. So I think that Jupiter here is saying, okay, yeah, I have to work with Saturn's limits, but I'm also going to throw Saturn because Jupiter is direct, right? Even though Jupiter is not, even though Jupiter is in detriment in Gemini, I still think the fact that it's direct and it's getting support from Mars here, Mars and Jupiter in Gemini, like there's a lot of intellectual gold here. Like there's just like a gold mine of information, insight, wisdom that you are gaining. And it's throwing that back to Saturn in some ways, saying, hey, like these are some new ideas here. I'm going to give you like just a brainstorm session. I'm going to give you a whiteboard full of all these different ideas. Now I want you to chisel and carve out some kind of structure in 2025 and 2026 based on what I'm giving you. So think about it as like for example, like in the health related space, the wellness space, like maybe again, you're realizing that, it's actually not healthy to, eat a certain type of food or a certain type of dairy, or maybe you're realizing that, something that you take for granted or that you do out of habit is actually like really bad for your health. Or maybe you're realizing that what you used to believe about the world or about a certain religion is now suddenly, completely fraudulent. So that Jupiter Saturn square, I think, yes, will be slightly frustrating, a bit of a traffic jam. But let's be a little bit optimistic here. Like I actually think that you have so many more tools for discovery now through social media, through alternative forms of media. Like why not just like, be part of that new system that's coming through in the next 2 years. Now we also do have for some key ingresses, I just want to mention these. Mercury enters Leo July 2nd. Venus enters Leo July 11th. Mars enters Gemini July 20th. The Sun enters Leo July 22nd. And Mercury enters Virgo July 25th. So those are the key transitions of a planet into a sign or a celestial body. But now to give you some dates to the noteworthy transits. And this is going to expand on some of the dominant transits I mentioned. We will have Mercury opposing Pluto July 2nd. And that's a time where maybe some major revelations come through for you. You learn maybe a secret about something or someone, or you break through some kind of psychic barrier, and you break through into your own subconscious or someone else's, or you just have a very maybe you're harboring a secret all of a sudden, maybe you're again revealing it, or you're just having a conversation with someone that's very deep and very penetrating. Then we have Venus squaring Chiron this month, actually during the Cancer new moon, July 5th. Venus square Chiron does have this feeling of either betrayal or broken bonds, broken trust, some breakups potentially, but also Venus square Chiron can be a harbinger of healing and nurturing, especially with Venus in Cancer. But I think with Venus in Cancer being about the family and what's familiar, there may be some feelings of loss or betrayal among family members, or while you're hosting something at your home. Like I mean, there could be anything like that. But ideally, you're using Venus square Chiron to really soothe and smooth out those relationships with maybe some people in your family, or to get some like it's very emotional, like just getting something off your chest, and it's like very cathartic, I think. And just by being emotionally vulnerable, like maybe you'll realize that there is a bridge between you and that other person, and that you can close those emotional misunderstandings or gaps. We do have Jupiter conjunct the fixed star Aldebaran in early July, around the time of that new moon in Cancer. So if I was to go back to that new moon, you'll see Jupiter right there, pretty close to Aldebaran, which is a fixed star associated with Archangel Michael and the Crusades. So, and actually that new moon is very closely conjunct the fixed star Sirius and the United States birth chart, sun. So when you have Sirius and Aldebaran active at the same time, you have to wonder if that is a turning point. with everything that's happening in the Middle East. So we also do have Neptune stationing retrograde July 2nd, and Saturn already is retrograde as of June 29th. So as Neptune stations retrograde, you are reflecting on, I think that this is a lot about delusions breaking down, which again, I talk about in my podcast more in depth. So, definitely check that out to get the full rundown of it. But, any false, any idealizations, any ways in which you've been, putting someone on a pedestal, like that's all ending here. Or even just putting your faith in, again, a belief system, or you've been sort of even like buying into some like ridiculous celebrity cultural phenomenon. It's like all these delusions are crashing down. So for most of you on a personal level, you'll probably see it as like suddenly, with Saturn also retrograde, you're seeing something more realistically, or someone sort of more realistically as they are. And so it's a time to reflect on also your health, like I said earlier. And so again, there's a whole sort of, I'm only addressing the tip of the iceberg there. But if you want to dive into, again, everything, all the sort of themes behind Saturn and Neptune retrograde, I do have that also on my newsletter, my Substack. I dive into that and the impact on each sign. And then on my podcast, I also discuss it. So, maybe just preempt this, or, get ready for this by just thinking about what lies am I telling myself, either about myself, about someone else, about my work, about my family, and so on. Like, it's okay. It's okay to be brutally honest. I mean, because I think the truth is really going to help you, again, like, channel the higher expression of Pisces, which is like, it's still truthful. It's like, there's a truth there, and it's sort of like a higher truth. It's a divine truth, and it's a universal truth, but you don't want to give in with Pisces to, escapism or deception. So we also have Venus opposite Pluto, July 12th. That's a time period in which your relationships are very maybe locked in a struggle where both parties are a little bit stubborn, but maybe there's a very intense sort of bond that you're forming with someone else, and maybe even like becoming overly attached to someone. But I think that Venus opposite Pluto can also be a time where people may be like addressing anything with like debts, like maybe you have some debt that you're trying to pay off, or hopefully you don't go into debt, but sometimes Venus opposite Pluto will spend quite a bit of money. Mars conjunct Uranus, July 15th. So this is the defining transit of July. Mars conjunct Uranus. Let's go to that. So that transit is very, I guess I've already given you so many different adjectives, but it just feels tumultuous. It's an upheaval. It's explosive. It's a maelstrom. It's pure madness. Honestly, I think it's pure chaos, and it definitely will affect the political race in the United States. Just given the fact that it's lining up with the Republican National Convention, it's on Trump's midheaven. It's in the Capricorn decan of Taurus, by the way, the third decan, which again, Capricorn is about structures, and we have Saturn, the ruling planet of Capricorn, retrograde in a balsamic phase of the Saturn Neptune conjunction, or the Neptune cycle. We also have a Capricorn full moon a few days later, conjunct Pluto. I mean, how destructive can you really get at that point? Like, really, you can't get much more destructive than that. So I would say, I mean, as an astrologer, it's very hard to predict exactly how Mars-Uranus will play out. I mean, there was a conjunction of Mars-Uranus 2 years ago, and it actually really barely anything happened. I remember making videos about that and thinking, well, will people make a quantum leap into, the 5D or something? And, I do think that a lot of people were sort of maybe like starting to change their trajectory. Because I mean, even in my own life, I quit my full-time corporate job about a month earlier. So, I definitely felt the effects of Mars-Uranus last time, but I don't think like in the news, like there were no headline stories that were like, wow, like everything has changed. But the difference is that this time, we have it in that third and final decan of Taurus, which is the Capricorn decan. I've been talking about this for years. Like once Uranus is solidly in the third decan, then that's when the systems start to unravel. And then we add in the lesser malefic Mars, and it's like Mars is hot, it's dry, like maybe it's a sudden, I hate to say this, I don't want to jinx it or, and I'm not saying this is a guarantee, but like maybe there's like a sudden fire somewhere, a sudden wildfire, a sudden earthquake. I'm in LA, so God forbid that happens, but also maybe a cyber attack. Because if you think back to when Mars was in Aquarius in February, squaring Uranus, there was a series of cyber attacks. And I've noticed that there are all kinds of cyber attacks actually right now. Even at like this dealership where I went to get my car fixed today, like there apparently every dealership of this auto brand is down. Like all the systems, all the scheduling software, the appointment booking. So it's like I had to like fill out this paper form and they were like, yeah, it's all convoluted. And I'm sure that probably has a really negative effect on their business. So we may see things like that, especially in the summertime in the Northern Hemisphere. Like there's a heat wave right now with Mars-Uranus. You wonder if there's like a power outage, utilities breaking down, the power grid breaking down, maybe I don't know. I haven't studied about the solar flares, before this show, but like I know we had some recently. Maybe there's more. Maybe there's more CMEs, and then that sort of geomagnetic storm shuts down a major grid. But I think that it's very much it's most likely a political firestorm, right? Like there's just going to be massive changes to the state of the presidential race, maybe to the candidates themselves. And I talked about this in June. Mars is still going to be in Biden's sixth house of health there. So you have to wonder if, yet again, that would be a theme. And just with Uranus and Mars, you have to expect the unexpected. I don't want to I don't want to overuse cliches, but like that's really true here. And if you have a lot of placements around the 26th degree of the fixed signs, then yeah, the unexpected will probably show up in your own life, but doesn't have to be bad, of course. But also Mars and Uranus is about individuation. It's about, sometimes activism or protesting. And so I could see a resurgence of maybe some like protests. And honestly, could just be a really shocking event. Like there is something about that conjunction that makes me a little bit uneasy because of the conjunction also to Algol. So it feels like there is this sort of, an upending of some kind that, may catalyze protests or demonstrations and frustrations, right, in the collective. So, and I'll talk about that conjunction much more thoroughly in my Substack newsletter. So just now I've given you sort of a range of potential outcomes sort of as I'm channeling through this show, but there's obviously more to come there. So we also have Mercury entering its pre-shadow July 16th. And starting July 16th, you will want to, pay attention to your communication, double check things, expect a little bit more difficulty while traveling, maybe some delays. And Mercury will eventually retrograde in August. But starting during the pre-shadow phase, with the pre-shadow phase, you are going to have to be a little bit more cautious with how you convey information and make sure that you're understanding things correctly as you interpret the information. We also have Mercury square Uranus July 21st. That could be a sudden shift in mindset, a sense of impatience coming through for you, maybe some scrambled, especially because it's pre-shadow at that time with Mercury, some scrambled technology related breakdowns. But then we have the sun opposite Pluto July 22nd, right after the full moon, of course, in Capricorn. That sun-Pluto opposition to me is very much a transformation of self, as always with the sun-Pluto opposition, transformation of relationships, and maybe the transformation of certain sort of leading figures in society. And then we have Jupiter square Saturn really starting July 24th. I already talked about that earlier, but really philosophies, beliefs being tested, And maybe with Jupiter square Saturn, we have some like, well, we do, I guess, with the Trump sentencing, but we have some major legal showdowns. And, you know, I think we have some continual legal, or maybe not legal, but we do have some hearings in Congress related to, you know, certain health related agencies. So maybe that would continue. And then Mars begins to form a conjunction with Jupiter at the end of the month. Not exactly, but you will start to feel with Mars conjunct Jupiter that the debates, like I really, and I talked about this back, well, many months ago, but Mars conjunct Jupiter in Gemini heading into August, squaring Saturn, like that's going to be absolute chaos within the political parties, both sides, Republican, Democrat. It just feels like nobody can agree on what to do. Maybe about something that really happened in July. Well, who's the candidate here? Or what's our plan? Who's the running mates? Like there's, it's very, very messy, very messy. And, you know, with Mars conjunct Jupiter, there's going to be a lot of people in the collective giving their opinions about what to do. You know, it's like, oh, maybe there is an alternative candidate. And so now just to give you a little bit more context, you know, with before we do the individual predictions for each sign, just remember that, you know, Saturn is in that balsamic phase, like I said, but yeah, I think that this month, for context, it's really about, I really think it's not only the Mars-Uranus conjunction, but really the Saturn-Neptune retrograde is so much to me about personal health. Like, I just want to underscore that. Like, really, this is a month where you want to like do a full audit and review of like your health choices, the state of your health. And, you know, there's, I mean, a lot of it is going to, you're probably going to look into like environmental pollutants or, you know, I don't know, God forbid, but like mold in your own house or something. Like, you know, these are the types of considerations you might make. It's like, again, how do I really make sure that I'm like cleansing, purifying, and actually with Jupiter, or sorry, with Neptune and Saturn retrograde, this can be to me very much about health, like of self-care, taking care of yourself, and not burning out, really. Like, and I know that that's a luxury that not everybody has. Like some people maybe don't have PTO, but like insofar as you can take some time, I think July's a little bit more anemic. Despite that conjunction of Mars and Uranus, that feels, yeah, like very explosive, but at the same time, like you want to just give yourself time to like really clear out other people's energy, because you probably have a lot of other people's energy living within your aura right now. So just to quickly highlight the new and full moons before I dive into the individual predictions. So we have a Cancer new moon, July 5th at 14 degrees of Cancer, ruled by the moon, of course. And so, you know, we do have Venus square Chiron. I talked about that earlier. That feels like very much, it could be a healing moment in your relationships, but it could also be a moment where there's a break. There's a breaking apart of trust. There's a breakdown in, you know, even, well, even with Venus being money, there could be some like anxieties about money or property, or difficulties within the family. And ideally, though, it is a healing type of moment as long as you're anticipating it. And we are going to have Mars conjunct Uranus pretty much already building by that time. So there's a tension there. But also with Mars Uranus, maybe you'll be motivated to go to like a concert or do something community related. And so that Cancer new moon is conjunct Sirius, the fixed star, the brightest star in the sky. So, you know, there could be something very spiritual underway there. And that could be the Venus Chiron squares. Almost like maybe some of you are meeting with a healer or a shaman around that time. And because remember, Cancer is very much a healing sign. And, you know, with Jupiter conjunct Aldebaran, it does feel like lines are drawn in the sand and that these religious battles could sort of intensify. And then on July 21st, we have the second Capricorn full moon, very much conjunct Pluto, while Pluto is trining Mars. So this is breaking karmic cycles. I think this is the end of maybe tyranny, the end of guilt, obligation, self-consciousness, and passing the torch to Aquarius. And this can illuminate some themes from December 2020 because it's very close to that 0-degree Aquarius point, and Pluto is at the 0-degree Aquarius point, where Saturn and Jupiter formed a conjunction. And of course, we have Saturn and Jupiter squaring each other soon. So this could be like hidden agendas coming to light near Pluto, people questioning authority and finding more momentum in their own individuation journey or in communities, and challenging some of the prevailing wisdom of the so-called experts, especially the experts who were dominating the dialogue at the end of 2020 and early 2021. So this, I think, look, full disclosure, in every astrologer does this. Like, anytime we have like Pluto ingressing into a new sign and a full moon, like conjunct Pluto, very close to Pluto, it's like there's a temptation to be like, well, this is the shocking truth coming out. This is like the corruption revealed. Now, I don't want to like rush to that conclusion, but genuinely, like when you have a full moon at the 29th degree of Capricorn and a retic degree, again, near Pluto, like that very well could be that moment where suddenly, and it's not that, and people are so jaded at this point that they don't really trust most authorities anyways, but I still think that this could be like a truly shocking piece of information, especially because it is a follow-up to the Mars-Uranus conjunction. So I think around July 21st, there could be disclosure about some kind of corruption within the government or a certain company, organization. There could be something related to the health of a leader. And I know I talk about that a lot, but this has been a prevailing theme for a long time. Like Biden took office shortly after the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. January 20th, 2021 is when he took office. And now we have Jupiter starting to square Saturn. So it's like, we are reaching a point of tension in that cycle. And so here it's like with the full moon at the 29th degree, we're seeing all types of structures that are now defunct or dysfunctional or lacking in integrity. And that could include the actual leaders, representatives who are, running the show. It may be sort of like suddenly shown that, with Pluto being power, like maybe there were some back channels with like funding, lobbying, maybe, some kind of financial crime. All of those things are are sort of subject to be illuminated during this full moon. And then we have Mars trining Pluto as well, Gemini to Aquarius. That's really innovative. That's very almost kind of genius to me and very empowering. So people are going to feel compelled to talk about their vision of change, their vision of transformation, and discussing it in online forums, in neighborhoods, at family gatherings. These are all like the wheels are really spinning now. People are brainstorming. They're thinking about like, what kind of future do I want to construct for myself and for the people around me? So again, there's a lot going on in July. I'm going to start to dive in now to what each sign is going to undergo, what kind of, again, energetic currents are flowing through for each sign. And I'm gonna situate this chart with the Mars-Uranus conjunction just for a visual here. And I will be talking about, though, the new moon and the full moon and the impact on each sign. So the reason I do that is because the new moons and the full moons are the cycles of intentions, peaks of energy. Like, that is the valley, and the peak of energy is the lunation cycle. So in the moon and the lunar cycles really do show what's most likely to happen in the collective as well. But for you on a personal level, it's like that new moon is when there is some kind of new energy coming through for you, a fresh start. And then the full moon is where you're kind of climaxing and you're having this major awakening, major epiphany, or you're actually bringing something into the 3D reality. So first we have Aries. Let's start with Aries and refer to your sun and moon and rising sign, because all three encompass and comprise your core being and your fundamental being, but you want to prioritize your rising sign. The sun forecast will affect your solar expression of your identity. The moon will mostly affect your emotions, your feelings, and obviously that's significant as well. So it's like the sun is the external self, the moon is the internal self, and the rising sign, is the body, the persona, and it really sets, of course, the entire house system for you. So as an Aries, what are you going through in July? So first of all, you have the Cancer new moon July 5th, and that is in your fourth house. A new moon in the fourth house can be, that is actually a fresh start for you in the domain of like home and family. It could be that you are moving somewhere new, that you are going to a family gathering, you are maybe seeing your family differently. You're starting to commit to, I don't know, like really just relating to your family differently. But I think that for a lot of you, that should feel like a nice new moon to kind of cozy up in your home environment, to insulate or to create that nest or to create that sort of that warm feeling of like I belong here. So Aries, you are trying to find a sense of belonging during this Cancer new moon. And the chart ruler, which is the moon, the chart ruler, meaning the ruling planet of the new moon, is trining Saturn, which recently stationed retrograde. So that can be challenging for you. Saturn, Neptune in the 12th house is sort of a call to evaluate your mental health. And, you're also your connection to your spirituality. But I think for Aries, like if you're feeling overwhelmed and lost right now, I think go to that fourth house, go back to your roots. Think about the nature of, okay, how comfortable is my home? Am I really getting along with my family and so on? So that's where you can kind of replenish and rejuvenate. Venus is squaring Chiron from the fourth to the first house. So for you, yes, you are very likely or somewhat likely to have a feeling there of like woundedness come up with maybe someone in your family or someone you're living with. But it could also be an opportunity to heal instead. Venus will trine Saturn as well. So the Venus-Saturn trine, the Venus-Saturn trine is really nice between the 4th and the 12th. That could be a commitment to, it could be a commitment to a relationship that has longevity from the lens of like maybe you're, on a similar spiritual path or something. Or maybe it is a relationship that's very healing despite the square to Chiron. So I think there is opportunity there. Mercury is opposing Pluto from the 5th to 11th. So maybe there's something really powerful you can do there creatively. And then Mars will be starting to form a conjunction with Uranus in your second house of money, natural talents, and self-worth. So maybe there's an unexpected financial conflict there, but also a sudden motivation to go after like greater financial success, or you literally value in the second house, you value your autonomy differently. And so maybe some Aries are starting to monetize something of their own volition, like an entrepreneurial sort of endeavor. And then we go to the Capricorn full moon, July 21st, and that's in your 10th house of career. So for Aries, this is a lot about, okay, have I learned all the karmic lessons that I need to in terms of how I work with authority? So during Pluto and Capricorn in your 10th, you've had to learn how to work with authority. You've also had to learn about, okay, what type of career is actually going to facilitate my transformation? So maybe on this full moon, you change jobs. Maybe on this full moon, you realize that you've already seen through, like a certain responsibility and you don't want it anymore. You don't need it. It's not feeding your growth and you're ready to, so in that way, it could be very healthy, but it could also be an illumination of like, a power struggle that you keep getting into with a parent or an authority figure. And so for some Aries, like this month is actually a lot about how you deal with your parents, and how that maps back to the way you deal with like a boss or a manager. And so a full moon can be a release point as well. So maybe you're, again, letting go of responsibilities you don't want, or it can be a manifestation moment. So maybe you are manifesting that job that you really want, or you are even becoming that parent or that authority figure. And not the chart ruler, but the ruling planet of Capricorn is retrograde in the 12th house, like I've talked about earlier. So finding a job that really serves your sense of mental well-being as well, and it does feed that sense of purpose. We also do have Mars going into Gemini at that time in your third house. So you will be feeling very motivated to debate, speak with people, communicate. You're going to be very socially active. And if you do want to write a book, I actually think that, starting in late July, that is prime time for it. And then Mars is trining Pluto from the 3rd to the 11th. Like your voice could really have a major effect and influence on a community around you. And then Chiron is kind of in a T-square with the sun and moon. So to me, that just doubles down on the themes I've talked about. So very much like you're healing, you're healing yourself as you heal that dynamic with maybe your family. And keep in mind, Chiron actually stations retrograde. I didn't talk about that in the key dates earlier, the key transits, but Chiron does station retrograde July 26th. So for Aries, yeah, you are continuing to reflect on your healing journey, which I know you've made massive inroads on since February, when Chiron and the North Node aligned. So moving on to Taurus now. So for Taurus, let's see what's going on for you in July. So now you have the Cancer new moon on July 5th at 14 degrees of Cancer in your third house. So that is a new beginning with maybe something related to communication. It could be like a media project, a writing project, a schooling program. Maybe you are starting to even like teach, but a lot of you are probably taking a local trip. I think that's probably what a lot of you will do. Or yeah, you're just, again, learning something new or having a very influential conversation with somebody. In that third house, it could even be like a contract that you're signing or something. But I think for a lot of you, again, it's just more about starting to open up a dialogue, open up communication, maybe with someone in your family, or open up a dialogue that is Cancerian, meaning it has some emotion behind it. And the ruling planet of the new moon, which is the moon, is trining Saturn in the 11th house. So you are very focused on you're trying to establish friendships that are sustainable, durable, long lasting. I think a lot of you are probably questioning your friendships right now, but maybe this new moon in the third is a great time to start up a conversation with someone, a friend or a friend group or a community that you feel like you can attach to for the long term. Then Venus squares Chiron from the 3rd to the 12th for you. A bit of an abstract one, but you may have if you have a difficult relationship with a sibling, this may be a time to try and heal it. I'm not sure like if it will go exactly as planned there, but if you're really trying to patch things up with a sibling, I think this could actually be positive, even though Venus square Chiron can be difficult. Just by watching this video, it's like, okay, if that is high on your list of priorities, like I don't know, I say go for it during that time. Then we also have Mercury opposite Pluto in the from the 4th to the 10th house. That to me, that could speak to sudden, like sort of deeper realizations about maybe how you want to arrange your home or how you want to sort of build a foundation that serves your career. Or maybe you have a realization about your career or about a family member or about a parent. So yeah, that's all in the cards. And then we also have Mars starting to conjoin Uranus in your first house. And I think that that's really the dominant transit for you. Mars conjunct Uranus is very, again, like I've talked about earlier, very tumultuous, very unstable. So as a Taurus, you've been building up this feeling of tension, and that could be your breaking point as well. So yeah, I mean, you could heal some relationships with people, but I also could see a situation here where it's like you just hit the reset button and maybe you reinvent yourself, but you also break away from a situation that maybe you really appreciated, but you realize that it was not really serving your needs for, again, autonomy and liberation at that point. And then we have the Capricorn full moon. Or sorry, let me just extend on that. That conjunction is really important for you as a Taurus. That conjunction could really change your entire year, the rest of your experience for the rest of the year. And I would just say like patience is a virtue there. Like you don't necessarily have to break something down and break it apart. But, you know, if you are feeling fed up with something, yeah, maybe that's the time at which you're speaking up. The Taurus is the thyroid, it's the thyroid. So you may be like vocalizing some kind of some kind of need. It's like, okay, I just need to be on my own for a bit, or I need to go explore this new idea, or I need to get out of this really stagnant job. So again, it could be very freeing for you, but also very volatile if you're not careful. So really just be patient with yourself and others during that time. And really find common ground insofar as you can, because a lot of Tauruses here could really destroy some very precious relationships. So then we have a Capricorn full moon July 21st in the ninth house. So that is a final sort of visitation of your beliefs, your philosophies on life, maybe your educational path. And with Pluto there, you have transformed over the last 16 years. Yeah, your entire outlook on life, maybe the sort of places you want to travel. But it's really about perspective. So that full moon could be you taking a long distance trip, coming back from a trip. Maybe you publish something. Maybe you realize that your worldview is actually flawed, or maybe you realize it's exactly what it needs to be. Maybe your belief systems are challenged by someone else. And again, if you're trying to go through the educational system, maybe you complete some kind of you reach some kind of milestone in your educational life, or sometimes with a full moon, I talk about this a lot, but the full moons can be beginnings. Maybe you realize you actually you want to enroll in this other program. And then Mars goes into, well, so the ruling planet of Capricorn, by the way, Saturn is retrograde in the 11th. So in some ways, this is actually about choosing whether or not you want to travel maybe with a group of friends. Like I could see that happening, and deciding, oh, these are just party friends. I don't really feel like there's any kind of like genuine bond here. Like maybe I won't travel with them, maybe I will. So I think for Taurus, put the focus, some of the focus at least, on the types of trips you would want to take right now. And then we do have Mars going into Gemini in the second house. So you will be very motivated to either spend money, earn more money, or really assert your self-worth. And yeah, I think that can be obviously very healthy. But you just had the Mars-Uranus conjunction, so you don't really want to like overstress yourself. You don't want to be overly dominant or assertive, because I think that can really shred apart some very, very healthy relationships, like I've said. And then Chiron is going to station retrograde July 26th in your 12th house, by the way. So you will be thinking about mental health, similar to not similar to Aries, but like you will be thinking about mental health, and also making sure that you have overcome any and all addictions, ideally. Now we have Gemini to talk about. So Gemini, you have the Cancer new moon on July 5th. Oh, sorry. You have the Cancer new moon July 5th at 14 degrees of Cancer in your second house of natural talents, money, personal possessions, self-worth. So having a Cancer new moon in the second house with Venus there, I think that could be like, that could be a new salary, some kind of financial gain. Maybe you are really valuing, something new or something about yourself differently. Maybe you are really stepping into your self-worth differently. You are valuing nurturing, which is Cancer. But I think for a lot of you, it is the birth of like maybe some kind of new financial situation, or you are, I don't know, maybe even deciding to, just seek a job that incorporates your natural talents more clearly. But I think that, it's a very, it's a stable position to have. It is a stable position to have Venus there. Venus in the second house. It's very comfortable in the second house. And so I do think the focus is on material possessions, wealth, and so on. And you also do have Mars, conjunct Uranus though in the 12th house. So really managing your sleep cycle is key. And so there could be some bouts of insomnia at the same time, but the new moon in the second house, I do like the feeling of that. I also like the fact that Jupiter is still, pressing ahead in your first house. So you're continuing to feel an increased sense of optimism, or, you're wanting a wider perspective on something. You're wanting to travel, explore new places. And, Neptune stationing retrograde in the 10th, Saturn stationing retrograde in the 10th. There is a possibility here that you are rethinking, though, your career choices somewhat. So maybe that new moon is the new career, the new salary, but with Saturn retrograde in the 10th, I mean, you're facing probably a lot of pressure in your career right now. And so a lot of people are depending on you and counting on you. So, take a moment to really think about, okay, do I want these responsibilities? Is this career actually serving my self-actualization journey? So yeah, I think it's it's a new moon to get back to basics. It's a new moon to really think about, okay, what are my personal values? And are they in alignment or out of alignment with the current career that I have? So then we also have the Capricorn full moon, July 21st, in your eighth house. And that is showing maybe you still have some lessons to learn with like financing, money, investments. And the eighth house can be very much about um, obsessions, addictions, our shadow side. And so maybe there you're having this moment of like illumination about, okay, there is this aspect of myself that I've like hidden away, I've tucked away. Now I'm going to actually reveal it and come to terms with it, come to grips with it. Or again, it's more about, hey, like I need to shift my financial strategy, my investment strategy because of maybe the career change I just made. And I need to tweak and optimize some of these things if I want to, like financially, if I want to reach my goals. And the ruling planet of Capricorn, Saturn, is retrograde again in your 10th house there. So a lot of these investment decisions are probably a byproduct of changes you've made in your career or reflections you've had regarding your career. And we also will have Mars going into Gemini at that time. So Mars going into Gemini should give you a fair degree of power. I mean, you should feel quite empowered to really take the lead, take charge, be the leader, and to execute on all kinds of plans and ideas. And by that time too, Venus and Mercury in the third house, there is a lot of communication going on, maybe some learning, creative writing that you're doing as well. And that's actually not even a bad time to take a local road trip or something like that. So for Geminis, the month of July is very much, I think, a reflective period regarding your career, whether or not you're on the right track. You're trying to evaluate that. But just know that by the end of the month, you do have a lot more battery power, I think. So even if you're feeling stressed right now in your career, I think Mars going into Gemini, Mars can be very disruptive in a lot of ways, but with Jupiter there, you're really getting a lot of vitality to, just say, all right, I'm going to chase after what I desire, and I'm going to get that. So all in all, it's actually a pretty positive month. I think you have one of the more positive Julys. So Cancer, I actually like July for you as well, even though, it depends on whether or not you've learned those karmic lessons with Capricorn. But there is a Cancer new moon July 5th at 14 degrees of Cancer in your first house. And a new moon in the first house is a fresh start. It's a new beginning of really anything. New relationship, new job, new look, new identity, new vibe. It's very rejuvenating, I think, in that way. And we also have Neptune recently stationing retrograde in the ninth house, Saturn stationing retrograde in the ninth house. So along the way, as you start this new venture, it may be sort of a byproduct of like these new philosophies you have, or you're changing your perspective on life. You see the world differently, and so you're going to move forward differently. We do have Venus square Chiron from the first to the 10th house. So because Venus is in your first house, There could be some difficulty with relating with a family member. There could be a challenging dynamic there. Or, in a lot of ways, yeah, there could be a relationship there that's ending for you or that's breaking, or healing. It's, of course, up to you. But having Venus in the first house square Chiron puts a lot of pressure on you, I think, to um, yeah, I mean, really patch things up with someone or to be vulnerable with someone. I think you will have to be quite vulnerable with someone around July 5th. And we also do have Mercury opposite Pluto from the 2nd to the 8th. So maybe some realizations about money or financing and suddenly realizing, oh, like I can't hide that from someone. Like maybe someone says, oh, you owe me this money, or suddenly you realize that suddenly maybe you have some anxiety about finances. Maybe they're misplaced there, but yeah, or maybe your instincts with Mercury Pluto can be very instinctive. Maybe your instincts are leading you to take a different path with some of your expenditures. And then we also have Mars conjunct Uranus in the 11th. That could be a very exciting social event or social time, but it could also be a moment where there's a little bit of conflict with a friend. So there could be a conflict with a friend sort of coming to a head between that new moon and July 15th, when the conjunction is exact. So yeah, I mean, as a Cancer also, I think with that energy in the 11th house, you want to be cautious about how you kind of behave online and in the social media environments, because Mars and Uranus can be a little bit unexpected there. So yeah, and then we also have a Capricorn full moon July 21st, and that's in your 7th house of partnership, union. And that to me is like the final stage of your learning journey with like, what kind of partner do you actually want to pair up with? Are you seeing the person you're currently with realistically? Um, this could be the end of a partnership for some of you, but it could also be like a healthy ending where it's like, oh, even though this partnership is kind of stable, it's okay, it's predictable. It's like, I don't want that anymore. I want to challenge myself. So some cancers are really challenging themselves, but other cancers maybe um, holding on to that relationship because they realize, no, this does provide the foundation that I need. So as a Cancer, like July is like your new beginning. Um, you know, it could be self-actualizing, and it's the end of any kind of partnership that's like really holding you back and kind of, smothering you, and it's like feeling like a weight on your shoulders. So yeah, I think it could be a very cathartic month. And we do have Mars going into Gemini in the 12th house. The one downside to that is, like I said, with Gemini's earlier, with Mars and Taurus, there could be a little bit of insomnia, sleep deprivation, but at the same time, Mars and Jupiter in the 12th simultaneously. I mean, you could really be in a conversation with spirits. You could be sleep talking or walking, but you could also be like really having very profound and sort of visionary dreams. And that could be a time to go into a place of isolation and retreat and write a book or finish your book, but like doing so in a place of isolation. So yeah, I actually think that a lot of cancers will do that at the end of July. A lot of cancers are going to be writing. They're going to be able to doing a lot of writing in a place of reflection and retreat. And they may write a letter to someone too, or they write the book, or they do something like they're writing a song. But yeah, cancers are in a very reflective month. But I do think that, again, this can be like a nice reset for you. So now we have Leos. Leos, you have the Cancer new moon in your 12th house on July 5th at 14 degrees of Cancer. The new moon in the 12th is sort of about nurturing your spiritual life, nurturing yourself in like it's practicing self-care. You're, maybe meditating, going to a yoga class. You are just reflecting on your spirituality, your mental health, your well-being. You are maybe committing to ending a certain addictive habit, problematic habits, and really finding peace within your routines, I think. Because the 12th house and the 6th house are connected. And The 12th house is also a place of letting go. So maybe letting go, again, of a certain habit in order to feel more whole within yourself. And we also do have at that time Venus square Chiron. So Venus in the, the ninth house, or sorry, my bad. Venus in the 12th house square Chiron in the ninth. I mean, that's a pretty abstract square with the ninth to the 12th, but it could be that you are ending a relationship based on disagreements philosophically. Maybe you're healing a relationship by traveling, but maybe while you're traveling, there's a difficulty with somebody. But I think for Leos, you are in a place where you want to evaluate like your philosophy and like, do you share the same general philosophy, vision as a partner or, someone else that you're connected with? Mars and Uranus are starting to form that conjunction in Taurus in your 10th house. That conjunction feels to me very volatile in the career. I mean, the Mars-Uranus conjunction, yeah, it could be like a launch point for you into entrepreneurship, but it could also be sort of the sandpaper effect where you're really butting heads with an authority figure, and it's just maybe it's apparent, but it's just causing a lot of frustration for you. So, try not to destroy all of your professional connections. Try not to go haywire publicly because it's in the 10th house. So for Leos, you really have to mind, like mind your P's and Q's with your career related choices because you don't want to like do something so volatile in the public eye that it ruins your reputation. Like out of all the signs, I think Taurus and Leo have the strongest chance in July of ruining their reputations. So just like don't do that, basically. And then Saturn retrograde in the eighth. You don't want to succumb to any addictions there. You really have to discipline yourself, and I know a lot of Leos are, trying to stay sober or they are, avoiding, certain habits. And it's like you want to press ahead with that, I think. But you are being tested in new ways while Saturn's retrograde. Like Saturn is really checking your lifestyle there. But it's also really testing your financial decisions. Like a lot of Leos, you're probably making pivotal financial or like investments in the month of July. Like maybe you're buying property, or maybe you are, shifting and shuffling the way you invest in the stock market, or maybe your own business, reclassifying your business. So for a lot of Leos, yeah, that is definitely a feature of July. And then we also have, again, the Capricorn full moon, July 21st in your 6th house of health, daily routines, pets, coworkers, work projects. So as a Leo, it's like you're learning your final lesson in the 16-year transit of Pluto and Capricorn regarding your health. For a lot of you, it's about health. And with Saturn in the 8th, I think there is like a mental health component. And I talked about lifestyle choices. So for Leo, it's like you really want to commit to healthy lifestyle choices here. And also, you want to make sure that you found some kind of daily practice or work or a project or activity that you can like feel good about, that you can dedicate all of your energy towards every day. So if you're cutting corners with health, like you'd probably see that more realistically here and realize, oh, I can't do that. I can't get away with that anymore. And also keep in mind that, Venus and Mercury, eventually the sun, are in your first house in the last part of July there. So that could be a point of time where, yeah, you are feeling more creative. You're feeling more social. You're feeling like you can kind of like, there's some camaraderie there. But then Mars goes into the 11th with Jupiter. I mean, that could be very social. Maybe you're traveling and socializing while you travel. You're traveling with friends. But, also you don't want it with Mars. You don't want to create too much disagreement within those communities or those friendships. But overall, I think Leo's like you're really practicing new forms of self-care, or you're continuing to prove that you're able to take care of yourself and you're healthy, overcoming those addictions and enjoying some nice socializing at the end of the month. Oh, and not ruining your career. It's also a good idea. So now we have Virgos. Virgos, you have the Cancer new moon in your 11th house of friendships, July 5th. So Virgos, there is a new beginning July 5th as it concerns your friendships and the people that you, maybe the communities that you are a part of. So really nurturing those relationships, those networks, maybe even going to a conference and interfacing with others. And we also do have Saturn and Neptune retrograde in your 7th house, though. So as you're forming these new friendships, you are also probably going through the gauntlet here when it comes to like some of your closest relationships. Like Saturn and Neptune retrograde in the 7th, like you're really, reassessing the viability of your relationships, like your romantic partner, business partner, best friend. You're really starting to wonder, like, again, am I on the same trajectory as them? Do we share the same values and visions and objectives? So for Virgos, maybe you're forming new friendships as a solace because you maybe lost a relationship or maybe you ended things with someone. Venus in the 11th, square Chiron, in the 8th. Having Venus in the 11th on a new moon, it does increase the odds that you would be socializing with people, but with the square to Chiron, maybe some sort of financial conflict with a friend, or maybe someone says something that triggers you or like sort of reminds you of something that you thought you had conquered or something you repressed. So a little bit of a tension there, but also you will have Mars and Uranus conjunct or starting to form a conjunction in your 9th house. So maybe you suddenly espouse a new belief system that's a little bit more about autonomy and it's more Uranian or it's more innovative. Maybe you suddenly have an impulse to travel somewhere long distance, or maybe you suddenly decide not to. Maybe you suddenly decide that you would like to go back to school. You would like to pursue this educational path. So all of those things are, yeah. I don't think that the 9th house is really that difficult of a house. It can be very subtle. And I know I've talked about that a lot in these readings, but there's just something about the 9th house that I find in sessions and readings and predictions that it doesn't always feature that prominently in someone's experience. And again, not to say that the 9th house is meaningless, but there is, I think, in the 9th house for a Virgo, just you're starting to maybe think about the world very radically differently, and you're harboring completely different beliefs. And I think that that can be a good thing as a Virgo because it's like maybe you're starting to see the world as like it is this place where it's like the possibilities are limitless and I can carve my own path. And then suddenly that helps you get out of that stagnant relationship because maybe you're in a stagnant relationship with Saturn in the 7th. And you could use Mars Uranus as an ejection point, and you're just like an escape. It's an escape route. And it's like, okay, I'm not happy with this relationship, but so like, let me just go travel for a while and get away, or maybe just socialize. And now we do have the Capricorn full moon in the 5th house, July 21st. And the Capricorn full moon in the 5th is quite creative. But it's also teaching you, I think, it's that final lesson about, well, maybe the dating scene. It's like, what does it mean to you to like have a romantic connection with someone? Or maybe it's about your creativity. Like what type of creative hobbies are you willing to commit to? Right? Like that, like even that could be, I think that's probably the most likely manifestation for you. But maybe you are also manifesting and bringing that creative work into the light. Maybe you're completing a creative project. Maybe you're realizing that you're committing to the wrong creative hobbies. You want to make those adjustments. And with Saturn and Neptune retrograde in your 7th, it's like you are also realizing again, if the spark isn't there in your current relationship, maybe it's time to move on. Or maybe you're realizing that you can reclaim that inner flame through your relationship. And we do have Mars going into Gemini, and that is a major transit for you as a Virgo because it's in your 10th house. And so with Mars and Jupiter in the 10th, you are burning a lot of energy in your career there and making inroads and making bold moves and new steps there. And I think that that can really ignite a totally new career for you, or it's like you're being asked to really step up in your career and you're kind of like, answering the call. So, I like them. I do like the Mars Jupiter conjunction in the 10th. Like, you could just take on new responsibilities that help you stand out. And with Gemini there, it's like maybe you're dabbling in different work streams all of a sudden. It's kind of fun and adding variety to your career. Or maybe you're even like just teaching. You're teaching people. And then Venus and Mercury in the 12th. Closing out July there, starting to maybe focus on, I don't know. I mean, the 12th house with Venus could be behind the scenes relationships. It could be karmic relationships, past life relationships, but it could also be your relationship to your spirituality, and you're focusing on your well-being in this isolated 12th house settings. So meditation, creating, being creative on your own, behind the scenes, or even having dreams with Venus there that are, I don't know, like kind of creative, and that sparks something new for you. So yeah, so Virgos, I think that you do have a very monumental month. I don't think it doesn't have to be a challenging month unless you're in like some kind of, you're feeling stuck in some type of relationship. Then I think that July, you have a lot to sort out there and things to solve. But if you are, if you're not in that situation, then I think that full moon in Capricorn is like sort of that final aha moment of like, oh, this is the type of romance I want. This is the type of creative, even this is the type of creative project I want to do. And then I do like how July ends for you because I think that you're feeling very courageous almost in like what you can do next with your career. So now let's go on to Libra and the second half of the zodiac. So Libra, you have the Cancer new moon here in your 10th house. So anytime you have a new moon in the 10th house, that can be the initiation of a new career path, a new responsibility you're taking on. Maybe you're stepping into parenthood, or maybe you are relating to a parent differently. But yeah, the new moon in the 10th is always a nice time, especially with Venus there, to initiate, some kind of new career path, and to, do something maybe in the public eye. Now, keep in mind, there are some difficult transits for you this month, continuing from what I said in a TikTok video like a month ago, or a couple weeks ago. Saturn Neptune retrograde in the 6th. I think a lot of you are experiencing some health challenges and you have to like really reset your lifestyle and do that to avoid burnouts. The South Node is in your sign. So a lot of you are exhausted. A lot of you are burnt out. And maybe with Saturn Neptune, you are experiencing some setbacks and challenges with coworkers. You're feeling distant from them. You're not getting along with them. But I think that, like I said in that TikTok video, like the base of the pyramid is your health right now. So really addressing your health and any health concerns, assembling a daily routine that's very vivifying for you. That's going to help you. I think it's going to help you just like clear your head, make better decisions. And then hopefully with that new moon, it's like you can focus on, okay, what sort of new tone do I want to set in my career? And then Mars and Uranus are conjoining in your 8th house. The 8th house there is very hidden, very secretive, but it can also be about finance. So maybe you're making a sudden change in your finances, your investments. Maybe you are suddenly experiencing a financial dispute with someone. Maybe you are having I don't know how to say this in this forum, but maybe you're having like a really eccentric kind of wacky, funky experience with like somebody, in an intimate way. And maybe there's a lot of people involved, who knows? But I think for a lot of you, it's probably about alternative types of investments, but also, yeah, I mean, there could be some breakthroughs into your subconscious there or something. And maybe there's like a group. I mean, that's maybe what's happening with Libra. It's like maybe there's a group that you're meditating with, or you're, like it could be like some kind of event, yeah, that you're going to. And there's something that happens at that community event or that social event that sparks some kind of new mindset and this like awakening. And maybe that helps you make different health choices or something. But I think for Libras, you're really digging into your psyche here. And at some point in this month, that could be a little bit intense. Yeah, it could be a little intense. But I think that it ultimately leads to this kind of like breakthrough. And you could get really creative with like how you're investing and how you're financing, and maybe even how you're structuring a business or restructuring a business. Mars can be very frustrating though. So maybe some of you are like trying to change or reclassify your business, restructure it, and like you realize that your impatience actually created more complications. So move slowly with any financial decisions there is definitely what I would say. And maybe some fights if you own a business with someone or you're in any kind of shared partnership related to like money. There could be some disagreements there. And then Venus is squaring Chiron at that time from the 10th to the 7th. So for Libra, maybe some kind of relationship with a family member is rupturing or it's going through a difficult phase. But it could also be healing. You could also be healing it at the same time. And then we have the Capricorn full moon in the 4th house. And that is the culmination and the illumination of something related to your family, your home, your property. And this is a karmic lesson regarding your family. It's like, what commitments are you able to make towards your family or to your property? Or, how can I really build a foundation? Have I really built that foundation? Like, do I feel solid with where I'm living? Do I feel solid with, you know, how connect it like with my family connections? And if not, then, it's like maybe on this full moon, it's like you're changing that. You're moving somewhere else. You are opening up to someone in your family, or you're telling them, hey, like this has to stop. We have to change this dynamic here. So for Libras, it's a very powerful month. It's like you're realizing again what you need to do, like how you need to improve maybe some of your health practices, but also, what new steps can you take in your career, and what sort of responsibilities do you and don't you want within your family? What are you willing to, what kind of foundation is going to make you feel really stable and secure? Going forward into this next era with Pluto in Aquarius. Like you could be really transforming with that conjunction of Pluto, transforming your entire conception of family, or how you show up as a parent, or how you, again, relate with your family. And then Mars going into Gemini in the 9th house, maybe some motivation there to start traveling at the end of July, and traveling very long distances, actually. I could see Libra as actually being among the most likely signs to take an overseas trip at the end of July. And then with Venus and Mercury going into the 11th, I do like the social activity that's starting to, increase in the second half of July. So yeah, it's even if you're a social media creator, your social media pages should be pretty active in the second half of July. Or again, you're just, really starting to participate in, some kind of like you're going to a gathering, you're going to a party. And with those oppositions to Pluto, there could be some intense romantic feelings every once in a while during those transits into Leo. Pluto in the 5th, I think that really can be like kind of attached to the romantic layer of a relationship. So yeah. And let's go into Scorpio now. Scorpio, you have the Cancer new moon in your 9th house. A new moon in the ninth house could be you booking in a long distance trip. It could be that you are starting to focus on publishing a book, maybe something media related. Maybe you are matriculating or enrolling in some kind of like higher educational space. Maybe you're beginning to teach or lay out some new course that you want to teach. And Venus will be in the ninth. So yeah, maybe spending money on travel, building new connections while you're traveling, reuniting with friends when you travel. And by the way, I don't know if I mentioned this, but the Cancer new moon is July 5th. But Venus is going to square Chiron, on that new moon, and like Venus square Chiron could be like, it could be that a relationship you're in is going through a bit of tension while you're traveling. So if you're traveling with someone in July, just expect a little bit of difficulty there, but I think you can overcome it and heal it. But at the same time, you will have Mars and Uranus conjunct in your seventh house of relationships. So I think Scorpios, out of all the signs in July, Scorpios are the most likely. Yeah, they're the most likely for sure, along with Tauruses maybe, to experience a lot of strife, a lot of struggle in their relationships. So as a Scorpio, you want to be very cautious about, you want to be mindful of like, okay, am I rushing things? Am I being difficult? Am I being impatient with my partner? And is that creating the upheaval? But also recognizing with Mars Uranus, like, do you want maybe to break away from that relationship? So being honest with yourself, but also not, ruining it by rushing and pushing your partner to, like, you're just more likely to be irritable as a Scorpio, really the first half of July. I think Scorpios are having a really tough time in first half of July with their relationships. But it could also be a time where with Mars Uranus, you're joining an activist group, or you're going to a demonstration, or you're doing something creative in a sort of a collective group. And then Saturn and Neptune are retrograde in the fifth. So you're probably making some big time decisions in July about your creative aspirations. With Saturn retrograde, you're realizing, oh, I should probably, if I really want to manifest something big with my creativity, like I should probably like commit to a plan of action. So for Scorpios, you're probably reflecting on that, and also maybe seeing the dating scene more realistically and realizing, oh, maybe the whole dating app thing is not really what I want to do. So maybe there's a bit of a disillusionment with the dating scene, but with Saturn there, you could also find a different way to participate in that dating scene and find maybe a long-term partnership at some point. Even though the fifth house is more short-term partnerships, Saturn there, I think, does add some longevity. But I think for a lot of you, it is about your creative hobbies, really committing to your creative hobbies in a different way. And then the Capricorn full moon is on July 21st, and that is in your third house. That to me is probably the completion of a writing project, or you're coming back from a trip, or you're taking a trip, or you're having a very serious conversation with someone, a very professional conversation. And with that full moon near Pluto at the 29th degree of Capricorn, it's like you're learning, these are the final lessons for you about how to deploy. I think for a lot of Scorpios with Pluto in the third, you've really developed this like psychic instinct and perception, and a deeper perception. You crave that depth in conversations. So with this full moon, it's like you're seeing where that has all gotten you. So maybe you're suddenly realizing, oh yeah, like I am a psychic, or I can do these things. Or you're realizing I want to research this topic more deeply, because Pluto's there is close to that third house. I mean, it's not in the third house, it's in the fourth house in Aquarius, but the full moon is close to Pluto. So as a Scorpio, you're zeroing in on something, you're researching it more deeply, digging into it more deeply, and educating yourself. And so maybe for some Scorpios, you're starting that new educational path, or you're completing your certification in something, you're proving that you have the skills to do something particular. And then you have Venus and Mercury in the 10th in the second half of July. So really focusing on career growth and, building professional relationships. And, I think good things are coming for you as a Scorpio in your career in the second half of July. And then we get Mars and Gemini in the 8th, around that full moon in Capricorn. So beginning to also start to execute on any of your financial plans, your investments, and also that can also help you tap into your psychic sense and your mystic sensibilities. And the Mars-Jupiter conjunction in the 8th can also be you can have a very potent connection, intimate connection with someone at that time. But also you may, again, really be channeling profoundly or really connecting with your subconscious in a different way or learning about the psyche in a different way. So all in all, I think for Scorpios, you have kind of a rough July in some respects. You can overcome it obviously by just by knowing what these energies are. But I think your relationships are really, really in an unstable position unless you're not in a relationship or you use this to try to find common ground with that person of like, okay, this is the change I want. This is the change you want. How can we kind of meet in the middle? Next, we have Sagittarius. So for Sagittarius, you have the Cancer new moon in your 8th house of taboo subjects, the subconscious, the psyche, financing, investing, and shared possessions. So as a Sagittarius, this could be a new investment strategy or financial venture. And because like Saturn's retrograde in the 4th, a lot of you are probably really rethinking, reassessing, reevaluating, like where's home for me? Where do I want to live? Do I want to invest in a property? Do I want to commit to a different property long term? So maybe that's you investing in it. And also we do have Venus in the 8th. So I think for Sagittarius, this is very much a financial type of new moon. Maybe you are merging, and the new moon is July 5th, by the way. But maybe you're merging assets with a partner or something like that. And but Venus squaring Chiron in the 5th, maybe there is that deep connection with someone as well. So you could be forming a really deep connection with someone, but that connection could also be a little bit triggering at a certain point or something. Like maybe that person reminds you of something that you had locked away for a long time. And Mars and Uranus are conjunct in your 6th house or getting close to a conjunction in your 6th house, or, around that new moon. And the 6th house is health. And so Mars conjunct Uranus as a Sag, there could be some unexpected changes in how you work every day, your daily routines, you may be shifting those, but also maybe there is a change in how you are, taking care of yourself. You may have an unexpected health related situation come up, or I think for a lot of Sages, you're probably pushing yourself a little too hard there at the gym. So really be mindful of that. Like you don't want to lift more weights than you're used to during that sort of mid-July time frame. You also, when it comes to coworkers, you want to avoid conflict with coworkers. Like Mars conjunct Uranus can get very unruly in that domain. So, maybe a coworker says something that just kind of sets you off, or you don't really want to collaborate with someone, or you want to move through a project faster than the other employees. You just want to slow down there, because otherwise you could actually really be out of a job all of a sudden. Like it does feel like almost that kind of chaotic. But for a lot of you, I think it's a sudden impulse to just change the way you work every day, your schedule, and your schedule could be very much in flux during July. So, just being kind of going with the flow there. And yeah, I think for a lot of you, though, very much the focus in July generally is about, again, your long-term decisions with property, home, and family. And then we have a Capricorn full moon, July 21st, and that is in your second house. So yet again, we're highlighting finances, money, salary. So that full moon could be the manifestation of, a new salary, or you are learning about, and you're learning some lessons here about like, okay, what kind of like, how can I really commit to that sense of self-worth, and maybe even transform my self-worth. And really by seeing my long-term skills or my long-term or how my innate gifts can carry me through the long term, how can I use that knowledge to attract like greater wealth? So, I think that full moon could also just be about you spending money, but I think I think for the vast majority of Sagittarius this is you realizing whether or not your financial objectives are on track or realistic or not on track. And then the Venus and Mercury transits through your ninth house. That is sort of underscoring this idea that maybe you would actually travel, which I know is, Sagittarius is about travel, but, during this time, especially, you could be investing in a long distance trip. And then Mars goes into your seventh house in the last sort of week and a half of July. So at the end of July, Sages, you are really craving a new relationship. I think that you're really chasing after it and probably chasing after it almost like too quickly in a way. But I think it's okay to just kind of like start that new partnership or introduce yourself to someone. So Sagittarius is, I think you are feeling pretty confident at the end of July to, really, if you haven't already in June or May, like, or I guess June, you could start that relationship around this time. But specifically, it's a relationship that maybe you would be more hesitant usually to kind of go for. But here it's like you have the courage to just be like, all right, I'm gonna tell this person that I like them. So of course, with Mars and Jupiter, sometimes there can be an inflammation of conflict in a relationship as well. But I think for the most part, it should be experienced in a positive way for you. So let's go on to Capricorns. Capricorns, controversial take, in some ways, but I made a video today actually about signs that would have the luckiest July over on my social pages. And I put Capricorn on there because for Capricorns, it's like you've been dealing with so much BS the last 16 years in a lot of ways. And it's like anytime you feel like you have a hold of something, you have a grip of something, and it's like really, stable in your life, it's like Pluto just destroys it. And that's Pluto and Capricorn. Like Pluto and Capricorn, it's like, yeah, you're learning all kinds of lessons, but like Pluto breaks those things down, those stable foundations so that you can go out there and do it again and do it better, or learn that next lesson. But for Capricorns, on July 5th, you have a Cancer new moon in your seventh house. So that is possibly that reset or that fresh start with a relationship. I mean, you could really start a new relationship around that time. You could, start a new really significant friendship, a new business relationship. Doesn't have to be romantic, but for a lot of you, it could be that new relationship. And you're really feeling like you're connecting with someone who is breaking you out of those patterns. Like, you maybe have been locked in some patterns with Pluto and Capricorn, and you've probably felt, enormously frustrated with that. Like there's probably been some anguish associated with that. It's like, how many times do you have to learn the same lesson? It's like anytime something's broken down, it's like, yeah, maybe it is because you're learning the same lesson again through someone else. But here it's like, maybe there's a new relationship where you're not learning the same lesson through someone else. You're truly learning a lesson in a completely different field. And that person is sort of revolutionary for you. And Venus will be in the seventh, square Chiron in the fourth. So that relationship could be healing. It could also be, in some respects, for some of you, the breaking up of a relationship. And I say that because you have two full moons in Capricorn in a row in your first house. So maybe for some of you, it's like, no, I'm letting go of just a lot of things in my life, a career, a relationship, and I'm just starting over. And then that seventh house, maybe you're just starting to desire new types of qualities in a partner. And then Mars and Uranus are in the fifth. So that could be a very unexpected romantic situation. It could be like a date where suddenly it's just like that person is not really your type. They're unconventional for you, but they like really pique your curiosity and you just feel like a lot of desire for them. It could even be a little bit impulsive, but for other Capricorns, there's actually a creative undertone there where you're just like feeling very creative. And Saturn, Neptune are retrograde in the third. So you are reflecting on the skills you still need to gain, whether or not you're on track or off track with like, an educational program. And the third house is your mindset, your communication. So you could just be seeing and perceiving everything more realistically and soberly, and maybe not pessimistically, but in the sense of like, I'm problem solving. I'm seeing everything as it is now. And I'm able to address conversations and topics very directly and not be avoidant. So for Capricorns, I mean, I guess to finish the story about the seventh house, we should actually talk about the full moon in Capricorn, July 21st. That is possibly the most cathartic full moon for the entire year for you. So again, since 2008, you've been going through this period of like building something up and having it destroyed and then transforming it or going through a rebirth. And it's like, how many rebirths can I go through? This could be that full moon where it's that final purge. It's that final purge that's going to allow you to enter the Pluto and Aquarius era with a clean slate. And I talked about this on my Instagram live recently, but just write down like all the lessons you've learned, or even like just write down like all the times at which you thought you had a stable, grounded foundation in something and when that was taken away. And then find the silver lining in it. But then also basically list out all those tower moments since 2008. List out all those tower moments and think about, okay, what was the connecting thread there? Did I have the same tower moment twice? Right? Like that is a tragedy. That would be a tragedy if you have the same, and that's probably happened for all of you. All you Capricorns, you probably had a tower moment, the same one more than once. Maybe it was dressed up differently. The castle was slightly different, the tower was slightly different, but it's like, yeah, maybe it was a different person with a different name, but they still reflected that I had unresolved issues with my mother or something. So for Capricorn, you want to really internalize the lessons here by July 21st and then say, okay, I've learned that lesson. I don't need to be with that type of person anymore. Now I'm ready to use that Cancer new moon, which we're still in that lunation. You're still in that lunation cycle to attract the ideal partner who's like really you're able to harmonize with them and grow with them. Venus and Mercury are in the 8th in the second half of July. So potentially making some positive, hopefully, financial or investment decisions. And then we have Mars going into the 6th. So the pace of your job is picking up. You're doing a lot of work. You are learning a lot on the job, communicating with a lot of people, socializing with them, but also during that second half of July or that final 12 days of July, you just want to make sure that you're not overdoing it at the gym or overexerting yourself. So now let's go on to Aquarius. Aquarius, you have the Cancer new moon, July 5th in your 6th house. This is about your health, daily routines, your lifestyle, coworkers. A Cancer new moon in the 6th is a great time to establish I think a daily lifestyle that is more nurturing for you. Venus will be in your 6th, so you are balancing out some of your daily routines, maybe getting along with coworkers a bit better, although Venus will be squaring Chiron. So you're probably bound to have like 1 or 2 difficult conversations with a coworker where it feels like maybe they don't understand you very well, or you just feel rejected in some weird way. But I still think that this new moon could be like the commitment to a new health routine or a new lifestyle or a new work style or a new work project or maybe even a new job that really feels comfortable, because Cancer is about comfort. Saturn, Neptune are retrograde in your 2nd house, while Pluto's retrograde in your 1st. So you are reflecting on the transformation you've experienced over the last 1.5 years since Pluto's been in Aquarius, and also reflecting on whether or not your personal financial goals are on track, or whether or not your salary supports the lifestyle you want, and also whether or not you're really committing to your natural talents and abilities in your job. And I think a lot of Aquarius is you're craving a more creative job because you have Jupiter in the fifth now. Jupiter in the fifth is, to me, like enhancing and expanding your creativity. And Pluto is transforming you anyways, and probably into the individual you're meant to be. So as an Aquarius, really think about, well, how can I infuse more creativity and spirituality into my career? And so maybe that new moon is that new job, that new lifestyle, that new routine. Or even you're starting to work with someone new. Mars and Uranus are starting to align in your fourth house of home, family, property, and yeah, that's creating conflict in your family, probably. So, yeah, if you're not on good terms with someone in your family, just like really manage that diplomatically in the first half of July. Maybe there's an unexpected event coming up in your family there, an unexpected conflict. But for some of you, I think this actually is about moving. You may have this impulse to suddenly like, I know that the fourth house isn't necessarily about traveling or anything like that, but I do feel like with Mars and Uranus in the fourth, there may be just there's something you may just want to change up about your home, or you end up actually wanting to move. But if you move based on like a sudden epiphany and you rush it, you'll probably regret it. So, just don't rush that move. Like I think that's like, again, like not everybody with Mars and Uranus in the fourth will move, but like well, yeah. So earlier, what I was saying with traveling is like if Mars and Uranus are in the third, which it is for Pisces, which we'll talk about next, that would be more about traveling. Same with the ninth house. In the fourth house, there is the possibility there of moving. Yeah. So, with Mars and Uranus in the fourth, yeah, I think it's okay to like take inspired action there and like suddenly realize, oh, maybe I could live somewhere else. But again, just be patient somewhat and be discerning about it. And just, again, avoid conflict with the family, but potentially expect it there. Mars and Uranus in the fourth could also indicate that you would maybe have some kind of social event at your home, or some kind of like unexpected, fun, funky, creative sort of like thing at your home. So, and then the full moon in Capricorn, July 21st, that's in your 12th house. 12th house of spirituality, places of isolation, meditation, addictions, mental health. The full moon in Capricorn is that final moment of awareness, since Pluto's been in Capricorn, of what type of spiritual practices am I committing to? Or am I manifesting, that spiritual lifestyle that I want, or I'm seeing this, I'm having a spiritual awakening or spiritual epiphany. Maybe the full moon in the 12th is just that you're having a very vivid dream that changes you spiritually, or it's very prophetic. And could be with the full moon, you're purging some kind of addiction. You're realizing that you want to address your mental health differently. And the full moon in the 12th can also be a letting go of something. And by the way, with Capricorn, it's just a thought that I just had. That full moon for you could be the manifestation of like who you are and who you want to be. And it's like you're no longer destroying or experiencing destruction in your life, but it's like you just are who you want to be at this point. So I do think for Capricorns, July could be a moment of self-actualization. But anyways, to get back to Aquarius, what I like about, the time period of the second half of July, like after that Capricorn full moon, is that Venus and Mercury are in your seventh house, and eventually the sun is in your seventh house. So for Aquarius is with Jupiter in the fifth, and then like Venus, Mercury, the sun in the seventh, second half of July, like you are in the best position all year, I think, in a lot of ways, to find your partner, start a relationship. Even though Mercury's in pre-shadow, I still think it's okay. And I think that full moon is just like a letting go. It's a letting go of the past and you're ready to step forward into a new relationship. And I think there's a lot of depth to it. It could be transformative, it could be a little bit intense, and definitely would have a romantic side, I think. I like the fact that Jupiter is in the fifth. And yeah, Jupiter in the fifth, as Mars goes into the fifth as well. Maybe some of you are having children, raising children or something, or conceiving. And yeah, once Mars goes into the fifth, like if that's not your thing right now, that's not on your list of priorities, maybe you are mostly just investing in your creative hobbies. But I think for Aquarius's, July could really, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, July could really serve you well. July could really serve you well in the relationship department. So now we have Pisces. So Pisces, the Cancer new moon is in your fifth house of, creativity, romance, casual relationships, and amusements, athletics. So a Cancer new moon in the fifth could be the beginning of a casual relationship, could be the birth of a creative endeavor, and it could be just a new commitment to you nurturing your own inner child. And we will have Venus in the fifth, so that does increase the odds that there would be a romantic connection forming. Venus square Chiron from the fifth to the second is a moment where maybe a date doesn't go well. Maybe there is a date that doesn't go well because your values are way out of line there. And honestly, maybe there's a date where there's a little bit of a dent in your self-worth, but obviously for a lot of you, it could just be a date that's very healing for you. Or you're even committing to a creative hobby that is healing for you. Then we do have Mars and Uranus conjunct in third. That is potentially about arguments and conflicts erupting, but it could also bring you a sudden desire to travel probably locally, but with Uranus and Mars, you don't know. Maybe it's honestly defying the definition of the third house and pulling from the ninth house. Like, let's travel a little further here. But yeah, it's probably a bit of a spontaneous trip. And maybe you are starting suddenly a new writing project, or you're having a breakthrough in a book you're already writing, or you are suddenly motivated to communicate a lot with people, especially on social media or something, or to analyze a bunch of like new type of information, or to even like I think you're intellectually just like very curious at this time. And Saturn, Neptune are retrograde in your first house. July is a bit of a heavy month in that way for you. I think that you are reflecting on a lot of your choices. Maybe there are some feelings of regret, but you should really just take stock of all the lessons you've learned since Saturn entered Pisces in March 2023, and just say like, okay, out of all the commitments I've made since March 2023, like, what seems to have the most longevity, what is sustainable, and how can I kind of refine some of the commitments that I've made, some of the professional endeavors that I'm like kind of embarking on? How can I deal with my health differently, my relationships differently? Like, you're just like going back and combing through all of your commitments and deciding like, okay, what stays, what goes, what's long term, what's not, what's going to serve my professional ambitions. Like, you're really starting over. You're starting like Saturn's in the first house, so you're really establishing a completely new foundation for yourself. You're taking that first step up that mountain, which will theoretically take 21 years to get to the top of. Not necessarily that you all have to wait 21 years to reach the pinnacle, but Saturn is going to take 21 years to actually reach the 10th house again. So, this is really a tabula rasa. And so you're in a position, I think, where you have time to really think about like, what do I really want to do? And again, like, don't freak out if you're like, oh, but I want to retire in 5 years. Like, obviously you don't have to work for 21 years, but in theory, Saturn the first is a time where you're resetting your responsibilities. So you are resetting your responsibilities. but also intellectually exploring a lot of new terrain with Mars and Uranus in the third. Like there could be some genius level epiphanies. And then we have the Capricorn full moon on July 21st. And that is in your 11th house of groups, communities, and friendships. So that full moon is very powerful for you. It's showing you whether or not you've committed to the right friendships. Like for the last 16 years, probably. I mean, like, this is really the climax and the culmination of like, am I feeling like, I don't know, like I can commit to these friendships long term, or that I have committed to these friendships, or do I feel like I belong in this community? And so for a lot of you, like maybe you manifest an incredible community or friendship, or yeah, maybe some of you are ending a friendship, but it's like, yeah, you're just realizing, okay, which friendships like are helping me grow, and I'm not learning the same lesson with them over and over. I'm not stuck. It's still stable, but it's like it's allowing me to jump into the next era of my life, because you are starting fresh in so many areas. You want those friends who are really supporting you and providing that foundation. Now, others could manifest like a really exciting social media related project. Others could participate in politics or something. And Venus and Mercury will be in your sixth at this time, the second half of July. So putting the focus on wellness. So again, doubling down on the health theme. So a lot of Pisces, I think you're looking into like, you're doing a full inventory on like, what food groups am I, what's my diet? What's my exercise routines? All these things. And that could even be a time period with Venus and Mercury in the sixth where your co-working relationships are really smoothing out and going well. And then Mars going into Gemini in the fourth house in the second, like the final 12 days of July. Maybe you are starting to communicate with your family more and more. Maybe some arguments will come up with your family, within your family. But also, I would really vote if you're a Pisces, think about hosting people for a social gathering. Mars and Jupiter in the fourth, very much looking to connect with people in your home and maybe connect with family members. And maybe you're learning about different ways, or you're thinking about different ways that you could decorate your home and design your home. And yeah, I mean, I think you're going to be learning a lot in your own home somehow. Like maybe you're just the home is a place of learning. The home is a place of conversation all of a sudden. So, and I think that's ultimately positive, because maybe you're working from home or something, but like the home is a place of discovery consistently. So in the second half of July, like you're learning about maybe some new topics, concepts, and there's a book that you read that helps you with that Saturn retrograde in your sign. And you're like, wow, like I never thought about life that way. And I want to now, because of that, just chase a completely different path. So overall, I think you actually have a pretty solid month, even though Saturn and Neptune are retrograde in your sign. Like, absolutely, if you don't manage those retrogrades very well, then July will be difficult. But if you really are honest with yourself, you're breaking down. And that's like the big thing with the Saturn retrograde for you is like, and again, I talk about that on my Substack, like, much more deeply than here. But the Saturn retrograde with Neptune retrograde, it's the complete collapse of any fantasizing, idealizing, delusional thinking. You're really starting to realize like what you need to do to move forward and manifest your dreams. So I know I cover a lot of ground today. July is a very reflective and introspective time. It is a time where we're all, I think we're reflecting on our health. We're reflecting on our lifestyle choices. We're reflecting on, are we delusional, or are we seeing things clearly? Are we seeing our relationships clearly, our job prospects clearly, and so on? Mars-Uranus will be very volatile. Like, there will be some kind of unexpected event in July that probably shakes up the political race in the US. And probably somewhere else in the world, there will be an unexpected event that sparks protests and activist movements. Like I said, there could be some natural disasters. There could be an earthquake, could be a wildfire. I mean, there's a lot going on in July, but I still think that ultimately you should view that full moon, July 21st in Capricorn, as like a purge, a cathartic release point, And I know I talked about this for Capricorns, but every sign should do this. List out all the tower moments that you've experienced since 2008 when Pluto entered Capricorn, and find the common thread between all those tower moments, because that is the kernel of truth and the core lesson that you were meant to learn. And that is the pattern that you're breaking out of. That is the key. Like whatever that common connecting thread is with all those tower moments, that is the wisdom that you now have. And that wisdom is your key to the next era of Pluto and Aquarius, which hopefully will allow you to individuate and break out of patterns that were probably keeping you stuck in certain systems. So again, if you want a deeper dive into Saturn Neptune retrograde and all the lunation cycles, honestly, check out my Substack newsletter down below. And also I have a podcast now, Astrology Unbound, with much better production effects than this. And if you want to check that out, go to astrologyunbound.com or my website, evannathanielgrim.com. As for my one-on-one readings, I am sold out through the rest of 2024. But if you want to see me in 2025, I will announce those soon. So anyways, thank you so much. And I hope you do have a very powerful month of July. So take care.